I woke up to the shrill ring of a house phone echoing through the foyer of our estate in Cedar Hills, an affluent black community just outside Washington, D.C. My chest tightened before I even picked it up. I didn't know why, but my spirit already sensed it wouldn't be good. Danielle, Mom and I just touched down in Rome. My husband's voice came through, excited, but with a sharp, dismissive edge. The view from the suite is insane. Make sure you check on Pops every hour, okay? We'll send pictures, maybe next week. Before I could respond, the line cut with a hollow tone. I slowly lowered the phone back into its cradle. The mansion around me gleamed in the soft morning light, every surface spotless, every marble corridor echoing with silence. But despite its beauty, it never felt like home, only like a stage set, perfectly arranged for appearances. Somewhere down the long hallway in the East Wing, my father-in-law, Judge Franklin Hayes, sat in the private suite where he had remained nearly motionless for the past 2 years. To the world, he was a revered retired Supreme Court judge. Within these walls, he was treated like a relic, useful only as long as his wealth and name served my husband Derrick and his mother Loretta. I was 35 when I married Derrick Hayes, handsome, polished, every inch the product of black excellence. I left behind my non-profit consulting career because Derrick insisted his wife should support the Hayes legacy from within. What he truly meant was that I had to be presentable, obedient, and above all convenient. Loretta made that clear on day one. She curated every detail of my life, from how I styled my hair to which charities I was allowed to support. Behind her charming smile was a warning. My value in this family depended entirely on my compliance. "You've been doing an exceptional job with Franklin," she would say, her voice sugary. "Keep it up, dear." The community just adores seeing our family so unified. But I knew their unity was a facade, and I was the centerpiece of their performance. I walked down the corridor toward Franklin's suite. The walls were lined with plaques, photographs of Derrick and Loretta shaking hands with politicians, celebrities, faith leaders. There was not a single photo of Franklin smiling. In every picture, he looked like a man who had already lost something the world couldn't see. I entered quietly. Judge Franklin sat in a deep emerald armchair by the window. He rarely spoke. His eyes had been dull and distant for as long as I'd known him, as though buried under years of silence. Or so I thought. As I adjusted the quilt over his lap, his eyes flicked toward me. For a second, I saw clarity, intention. He studied me, as if weighing a decision. "Would you like your tea now?" I asked softly. Instead of the usual blank stare, he blinked. Slowly, deliberately. A chill went through me. I stepped back. For 3 years, he had refused to speak to anyone. Derrick claimed the doctor said Franklin could no longer comprehend conversation. But in that moment, I knew something was different. Later that afternoon, while preparing tea in the kitchen, a quiet voice called from down the hall. "Danielle, come here, please." I froze. It was Franklin. I hurried to his room, heart pounding. He was already sitting upright in his chair, his gaze sharper than I had ever seen. "Sir, do you need me to call a doctor?" He raised his hand. "No," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I need you to listen." I stood completely still. "For 2 years," he continued, "I've let them believe I was fading away. I needed to see who they truly were when they thought I couldn't fight back." My lips parted, but no sound came out. "I am not ill," he said clearly. "I never have been. And now, it's time you know the truth about Derrick and Loretta and what they've planned for you." My breath caught in my throat. This was the day everything changed. I stood there, stunned, as Judge Franklin motioned for me to sit. The air in the room felt heavy with secrets pressing to be released. "You've been in this house for what, 3.5 years?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I answered, my voice barely audible. "In that time," he continued, "you've abandoned your passions, your independence, your identity. Not because you were asked, but because you were groomed to believe that serving this family was an honor." He wasn't wrong. Somewhere between Derrick's promises and Loretta's expectations, I had lost sight of who I was. "Derrick and Loretta have been planning to remove you from the estate," Franklin said, his eyes fixed on mine. "They've already met with attorneys. They intend to claim you manipulated me. Once I pass, they plan to cut you out of everything. The words settled over me like ice. They told me you trusted me, I whispered. They trust no one, he replied. Not even each other. For them, wealth is not security, it is weaponry. I clutched the armrest, trying to steady myself. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Franklin's gaze softened, revealing something I had never seen in him before, regret. Because you are the only person in this house who has treated me as a human being. You spoke to me, read to me, brought me outside, even when you thought I couldn't hear a word. I've been watching, Danielle. And now I need your help. My help with what? I asked, though deep down I already knew. To expose them, he said, and to take back control of what I've built. Not for my son, not for appearances, but for our people. For the community my ancestors fought to uplift. He turned to a drawer beside him and pulled out a folder. It was thick, filled with legal documents, bank records, recorded conversations. As I flipped through them, my heart pounded louder with each page. Hidden accounts, backdoor deals, documents transferring community trust funds into private shell corporations under Derrick's control. This is fraud, I whispered. It's treason against our legacy, Franklin corrected. Everything I built, every dollar, came from black people who put their faith in our justice system and in me. Derrick only sees dollars. I see souls. He leaned back slowly, breathing evenly, but his voice held a quiet flame of conviction. You must gather proof, he said. Conversations, digital records. I need their own words coming from their own mouths. I nodded slowly. I didn't feel strong. I didn't feel brave, but I felt purpose. That night, everything began. I placed discreet recording devices in Derrick's study, the dining room, and the lounge, areas where he and Loretta often held private conversations. By day, I played the obedient wife. By night, I documented every whisper of betrayal. Days passed. Each night I returned to Franklin's room with files and audio clips. He analyzed each piece, making meticulous notes. He was sharper than any attorney I'd ever met. One evening, as I stood outside the study, I heard Derrick's voice through the slightly ajar door. We need everything transferred into the Hayes Trust before the old man signs anything else, Derrick said. Loretta responded, her tone cold and controlled. And make sure Danielle keeps playing her role. She thinks being useful will guarantee her a place here. Let her stay comfortable. It'll make cutting her off easier when the time comes. The sound of their laughter burned through me like acid. When I played the recording for Franklin, he closed his eyes for a long moment. I knew it, he finally said. They were never planning to honor the Hayes name, only to exploit it. He opened his eyes and looked at me with an intensity that made me sit up straighter. It's time, he said. We moved to Phase 2. My pulse quickened. What is Phase 2? He reached into the drawer again and pulled out a sealed envelope. I'm transferring every asset, every company, every property, every foundation, into a new charitable trust, one that cannot be reversed or challenged. And you, Danielle, will serve as its director. I went completely still. Me? But I don't have the credentials to run a... Yes, you do, Franklin interrupted firmly. You have character. You have integrity. Those are qualifications Derrick could never buy. Tears sprang to my eyes, not from sadness, but from the sheer weight of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. I will do this, I said quietly. Not just for you, but for everyone they would have destroyed. Franklin nodded once. Then prepare yourself, he said, because when they return from Rome, all hell will break loose. The day Derrick and Loretta returned from their lavish vacation, the sky over Cedar Hills was overcast, thick clouds hanging low as if they, too, sensed a shift in the air. I stood on the upper balcony, watching their sleek black luxury SUV roll through the iron gates. The vehicle was followed by 2 assistants unloading designer luggage. Even from a distance, I could hear their laughter, carefree, entitled, oblivious to everything that was about to unfold. Loretta stepped out first, dressed in a cream trench coat, oversized sunglasses covering half her face. Derrick followed, adjusting his cufflinks as though the world were a stage built exclusively for his entrance. Danielle, Derrick called in a sing-song voice. Hope you didn't miss us too much. I forced a pleasant smile and descended the staircase to meet them in the foyer. "How's Daddy?" Loretta asked casually, removing her sunglasses without making eye contact. "He's in the study," I replied. "He asked to see you both immediately." Loretta paused mid-step. Derrick frowned slightly. "He's awake?" Derrick asked, confusion flickering across his face. "He's alert," I replied evenly. "And waiting." Loretta's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. They exchanged a quick, uneasy glance before following me down the hallway. The atmosphere shifted with each step, tension gathering like static. Inside the study, Judge Franklin was seated behind his mahogany desk, posture tall, eyes gleaming with absolute clarity. No longer the silent patriarch, they were now confronted with the man they had underestimated. Loretta froze at the threshold. "Daddy," she breathed, her voice frail. You're looking well." Franklin gestured to the seats opposite him. "Sit." They obeyed, confusion turning to suspicion. "I've summoned you both because changes have been made," Franklin began. His voice held the controlled authority of a man who had once shaped state law with a single ruling. "Effective immediately, all assets, trusts, real estate holdings, business entities, and discretionary accounts under the Hayes name have been legally transferred to the Franklin Hayes Community Foundation." Derrick blinked. "What foundation?" "One I established without your input," Franklin answered. "One designed to serve the people, not your lifestyles." Loretta tried to compose herself, folding her hands neatly in her lap. "Daddy, this seems drastic. We've always supported your vision." Franklin leaned forward. My vision? My vision was justice, representation, empowerment. Your vision has been greed." Derrick's composure shattered. "Dad, you can't just move everything without consulting us. That's not how this works. It is when I am still alive, legally competent, and in full control," Franklin replied sharply. Loretta's polite tone hardened. "And who, may I ask, is managing this foundation?" Franklin turned toward me. "Danielle is the executive director." The room combusted in silence. Derrick stood abruptly, his voice rising. "You put her in charge? She's been manipulating you." "No," Franklin cut in. "She has cared for me, protected this house, and upheld the Hayes name more honorably than either of you. She is the daughter-in-law I prayed for, and the only one I trust." Loretta's mask slipped, eyes blazing with restrained fury. "This is betrayal." Franklin rose from his chair, shoulders squared. "No, this is justice. You have 1 week to vacate this home and remove yourselves from any involvement in Hayes Enterprises. If you resist," he reached into a drawer, pulled out a voice recorder, and pressed play. Derrick's voice emerged, cold and calculated. "We just need his signature. Once he's gone, Danielle is out. We'll lock her out of everything." Loretta's voice followed. "She's naive. Let her keep smiling until we're done with her." In that moment, all color drained from their faces. Their own voices had sentenced them. Derrick reached across the table, slamming his fist. "You're going to regret this." Franklin looked him dead in the eye. "No, son. You already do." Without another word, Franklin turned to me. "It's time." Derrick and Loretta stared in horror as I stepped forward and placed a legal document on the desk. It bore the seal of the court and my signature as director of the foundation. "This decision is final," I said, my voice steady. "And irrevocable." Loretta's hands shook. Derrick looked ready to lunge at me. But neither of them said another word. They had been defeated by the truth. In the days that followed, chaos erupted in the house. Derrick shouted into phones, contacting attorneys, reaching out to political allies, corporate board members, anyone who could reverse the decision. But Franklin had prepared everything flawlessly. The paperwork was airtight. The foundation's charter was protected by legal statutes preventing any familial claim. Every door was closed to them. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Derrick stormed into the kitchen. He stood inches from me, rage burning in his eyes. "You think this makes you powerful," he hissed. "You will never be one of us." I met his gaze without blinking. "I never wanted to be one of you," I replied. "I wanted to be free." He stared at me as if seeing me for the first time, not as a quiet wife, not as a caretaker, but as the woman who dismantled his empire. The next morning, moving trucks lined the driveway. By sunset, Derrick and Loretta Hayes were gone. The house, once heavy with secrets, finally exhaled. By the end of that week, the Hayes mansion no longer echoed with tension or silent judgment. It echoed with possibility. The following morning, I found Judge Franklin seated in his sunroom, gazing out over the rolling lawn where magnolia trees swayed in the gentle breeze. But this was not the silent man I had once known. His posture was strong. His eyes were alive. "It's time," he said, turning toward me, "to transform this house from a monument of ego into a sanctuary of purpose." Within days, the estate began to change. The marble ballroom was converted into a community innovation hub for young entrepreneurs. The East Wing became a career training center offering mentorship, technology labs, and wellness services. Rooms once closed off for preserving luxury were reopened for public use, filled with books, computers, and learning spaces. The old banquet hall was redesigned into a free clinic for underserved families, honoring Franklin's late mother, a nurse who had once treated patients on her front porch during segregation. The transformation was breathtaking, but it didn't happen overnight. It required vision, strategy, and unwavering faith in a new legacy. The morning of the grand opening, I stood at the top of the grand staircase, wearing a deep emerald suit. Volunteers bustled through the hallways, finalizing signs that read, "The Franklin Hayes Center for Community Advancement, Restoring Legacy, Building Futures." Outside, a crowd gathered. Families, elders, young professionals, local leaders, church choirs, historically black college alumni. They hadn't come for spectacle. They came for hope. As the ceremony began, murmurs of awe rippled through the audience at the sight of Franklin stepping forward with a cane, not because he couldn't walk without it, but because it had belonged to his grandfather, a Pullman porter who helped organize one of the first black unions in the country. Franklin spoke first. "For too long," he said, voice resonating with conviction, "our names have been attached to symbols of wealth, but not always to symbols of service. Today, that ends. Everything I have, everything I've earned, now belongs to the people who built me, my community." I stepped to the podium next. The crowd quieted. "This home used to be closed off, reserved for privilege," I said. "But a house has no meaning without purpose. Starting today, this estate is not a display of success. It is a launchpad for others to succeed. We are not here to give charity. We are here to build power." Applause thundered across the estate grounds. As guests toured the mansion-turned-center, many of them stopped me in tears. A teenage girl touched the wall of the new music studio and whispered, "This feels like a dream." An elderly man, a retired civil rights attorney, shook my hand and said, "What you're doing here, this is history." Even the media arrived, not expecting a scandal, but witnessing a rebirth. That evening, as the sun set in golden hues across the courtyard, Franklin and I sat quietly beneath the magnolia trees. "You've done well," he said softly. "We did this together," I replied. "No," he said, turning to me with pride in his eyes. "You are the future, Danielle. I live my life trying to uphold justice in a courtroom. But you are bringing justice into people's everyday lives. That is far greater." His voice trembled slightly, not with weakness, with emotion. For the first time, he looked truly at peace. Weeks later, as the center's programs grew, I received a handwritten letter from a woman in North Carolina named Monique. Her words stopped me in my tracks. "I watched your story online. I saw how you stood up when the world expected you to be silent. Because of you, I found the courage to leave a marriage that was destroying me. Thank you for showing me that survival is not enough. We are worthy of power and purpose." Tears fell freely as I read it. I looked up to find Franklin standing in my doorway. "She's not the only one," he said. "More letters have arrived." Behind him stood one of our volunteers, holding stacks of envelopes. In that moment, I realized the truth. This wasn't just a change in my life. It was a movement. Spring arrived early that year, wrapping the Hayes estate. Now the Franklin Hayes Community Advancement Center, in a soft golden light that seemed to promise new beginnings. The once intimidating gates stood open, greeting everyone with the words etched upon the new archway. For the community, for the legacy, for the future. The transformation was complete, not just of a property, but of destinies. Every morning, I walked through the halls and heard the sounds of progress. young entrepreneurs pitching ideas in the innovation lab, single mothers attending financial literacy classes, retirees mentoring teenagers on career paths, a gospel choir rehearsing for an upcoming cultural showcase downstairs. The air itself felt alive, no longer a heavy silence of secrets, but a vibrant harmony of voices working towards something bigger than themselves. People now greeted me by my title. Director Danielle Hayes, good morning. Each time I heard it, I stood a little taller, not from pride but from gratitude. I had gone from being invisible in my own home to being trusted with the power to uplift thousands. One afternoon, I found Judge Franklin in the garden, seated beneath the magnolia trees where we often talked. His health had begun to wane, not from illness but age. Yet his spirit remained unbreakable. I want you to know, he said, as sunlight filtered gently through the branches. I spent my life upholding laws written by others. But you, Danielle, you rewrote the meaning of justice in this family. And in this nation. I held his hand, tears gathering in my eyes. You gave me the chance no one else would. You believed in me when I didn't have the strength to believe in myself. He smiled faintly. You were never weak. You were waiting for the right battlefield. Franklin passed peacefully in his sleep 2 months later. We held a public memorial on the estate lawn. People from across the country, judges, activists, pastors, artists, youth leaders, came to honor him. But the most powerful moment came when a young girl stepped up to the microphone. My name is Layla, she said softly. Before the center opened, I didn't know who I wanted to be. Now, I want to become a lawyer like Judge Hayes, and a leader like Miss Danielle. There wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. Franklin had not left this world defeated by family betrayal. He had ascended as a legend whose legacy was safeguarded by the very community he devoted his life to. In the months that followed, the foundation expanded. Satellite programs were launched in Baltimore, Richmond, and Detroit. Scholarships were awarded to hundreds of first-generation college students. Policy task forces were formed to advocate for reform in housing, education, and criminal justice. And through it all, my name was no longer an afterthought in the Hayes family story. It was a new beginning of the Hayes legacy itself. One evening, as I concluded a board meeting, I stepped out onto the balcony overlooking the courtyard. The evening breeze carried laughter, music, hope. For a moment, I remembered the day I once stood here feeling trapped, watching Derrick and Loretta return from their trip, believing they controlled my destiny. Now I stood in the very same spot, free, empowered, in complete control of my life's direction. I whispered into the wind, not as a prayer, but as a declaration. Our ancestors built greatness from nothing. Now it is our turn to build a future worthy of their sacrifice. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was a movement, a testament to every woman who had ever been silenced, overlooked, or underestimated. And as long as breath existed in my body, I would continue to build, to lead, and to uplift. Because justice is not a destination, it is a legacy we must all protect. And that legacy now had a name, the Franklin Hayes Foundation for Community Advancement. And I, Danielle Hayes, would carry it forward, fearlessly. If this story moved you, like and subscribe for more powerful stories about family, justice, and transformation. Share your thoughts below. Your story might inspire someone else. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next episode.